65 sacks. Graz, lead us off. Way too early MVP is?
Joe Burrow. The way the Bengals schedule sets up is perfect for him. If he can stay healthy all year, I think the Bengals make a lot of noise.
Yes, exactly. That's precisely the topic I want to explore today. Joe Burrow as the MVP favorite. Now, I recognize that I've been engaged in numerous MVP discussions recently, so please bear with me if I reiterate certain perspectives on how I evaluate this award. My approach doesn't simply involve identifying the most talented quarterback or the player with the flashiest statistics. The MVP conversation is fundamentally driven by narrative, the stories we tell ourselves about players, their journeys, and their moments. And this is precisely where Joe Burrow stands out to me. He possesses what I consider the most compelling narrative entering the upcoming season, and this isn't merely about storytelling, it's anchored in the undeniable reality that he's an elite, special talent, the caliber of quarterback we'll remember as an all-time great. So let's dive into this thoroughly. Before we proceed, I want to extend a sincere request to all Cincinnati Bengals supporters watching. Please remember to subscribe and watch the complete video. This genuinely represents the most significant way you can contribute to the growth and sustainability of this channel. It enables us to continue having the most objective, level-headed, and honest discussions about the Bengals. Your support makes an enormous difference, and I would be genuinely grateful for it. But returning to the main subject. These types of speculative discussions, I prefer to approach them with a degree of looseness and enjoyment. I try to avoid framing them as definitive predictions or presenting them as concrete evidence about any particular player's worth or future performance. There are simply several narratives that I find particularly compelling right now. And crucially, these narratives must be paired with genuine on-field potential, because narrative alone isn't sufficient. Let me use Matthew Stafford as an illustrative example here, since we see him mentioned in these conversations. In my assessment, Stafford has minimal probability of claiming the MVP again. Unless he surpasses what he accomplished last season, I just don't see it happening. That's simply how I evaluate the landscape. Now, Drake May will certainly have momentum entering the season. Caleb Williams carries tremendous momentum as well. Naturally, everyone wants him to become the next Mahomes, so that narrative energy is substantial. And then we have Justin Herbert and Joe Burrow. When I consider the complete picture, the X's and O's, the football acumen, what's achievable on the field, combined with projected standings, and perhaps most importantly, the narrative dimension and the public's appetite to see a particular quarterback crowned MVP, if I had to identify where the maximum momentum lies, it would clearly be with Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert. After them, I place Caleb Williams, and then we have to consider Patrick Mahomes' situation, coming off injury with everyone eager to see him reclaim his throne. Boo. T. Burrow represents something unique. There's this sense that it's simply his time now. We've had Mahomes, we've had Lamar Jackson, we've had Josh Allen, and there's this palpable fragility surrounding Joe Burrow's career narrative. If he delivers an outstanding season while maintaining his health, and the Bengals secure a playoff berth, there was already an extraordinarily compelling argument for him to have won the MVP in 2024. I've highlighted that particular season repeatedly. I've conducted comprehensive deep dives, compared his performance to Patrick Mahomes' Super Bowl winning seasons and Mahomes' 2020 campaign, and I've concluded that what Joe Burrow accomplished in 2024 ranks as one of the most egregiously overlooked seasons in NFL history. I want to emphasize that I don't make extreme statements simply for dramatic effect. But I am absolutely confident that we're discussing one of the most underappreciated brilliant quarterback performances in the history of the league. And it's barely mentioned in mainstream discourse. Now, if Cincinnati had managed to reach the playoffs, even securing just a wild card berth, much like Matthew Stafford did with the Rams, that would have changed everything. This is central to my argument. Because the common refrain is always, well, Joe Burrow can't win the MVP because we traditionally award it to players on the first or second seed. But Matthew Stafford was what, the 5 seed? So don't feed me that nonsense. He was the 5th seed. It doesn't matter how people felt about that team being actually the real best team. They weren't. They were the 5th seed. And they didn't win the Super Bowl. So they demonstrably weren't the best team. I don't want to hear that argument anymore. So I genuinely wonder, if Burrow is performing at an elite level, staying healthy, putting up impressive numbers, and the Bengals simply reach the playoffs, could the MVP go to him? I don't think Justin Herbert, for instance, carries that same energy. I don't believe he necessarily has that specific narrative advantage. Simply by virtue of the perception, do we feel your time is running out? Do we sense that you could have won it previously but didn't? I don't see that narrative surrounding Herbert. Now, to be perfectly clear, if the Chicago Bears and Caleb Williams are dominating and secure the 1 seed, that makes things considerably more difficult. It would also be a different scenario if the Seattle Seahawks are the 1 seed again, having a great season with Sam Darnold playing well, but nobody's seriously suggesting Darnold should be in the MVP conversation. If Stafford and the Rams are the number 1 seed and performing admirably, many will attribute it to the team being exceptionally stacked. Yes, they're the 1 seed, but unless Stafford throws for something like 60 touchdowns with an absurdly low interception rate, something truly extraordinary, I could envision it. Because that's essentially what we witnessed last season. So that's where I believe Joe Burrow has tremendous momentum, and this isn't even mentioning his obvious greatness. When I discuss perception and momentum, I don't want anyone to misinterpret this as me claiming it's purely narrative-based. No, it's still fundamentally rooted in exceptional ability. It's grounded in his special talent. Now, consider the other aspect of this equation. Ideally, the Bengals' defense will be significantly improved. And consequently, Ja'Marr Chase likely won't need to explode for 1,800 receiving yards. The ideal scenario, the reality I envision, is the Bengals having a season similar to what the Seattle Seahawks experienced last year. Definitely some exciting plays, definitely some impressive stretches where Jackson Smith-Njigba or Ja'Marr Chase are absolutely dominating, but you're not entirely dependent on that. The production ebbs and flows naturally. In the second half of last season, Jackson Smith-Njigba wasn't nearly as hot as he was early on, and that was perfectly fine. They still found ways to win. You didn't need to live and die by that production. So ideally, Joe Burrow doesn't need to have this absurd, video game season. And they still win anyway. Ideally, he doesn't have to throw for 5,000 yards. There are many fourth quarters where Burrow has thrown for 280 yards with maybe 2 touchdowns, and he doesn't cross the 300-yard threshold or get that additional touchdown because he simply doesn't need to. They're up by 10 5 minutes remaining, and they're just running out the clock. That's it. This is always one of the trickiest elements when trying to project a quarterback's statistical output. On the flip side, consider Stafford's situation. They were just crushing opponents. There were games where you could accumulate a bunch of touchdowns because the Jaguars were falling apart or the Eagles' first half was a disaster. Some of those concrete moments allowed them to really pile on touchdowns, really pile on points. And I'm not certain the Bengals would do that even if they were in a position to do so. At this stage of Burrow's career, at this point in the Bengals' trajectory, I'm not convinced they would keep their foot on the gas. I wonder if they'd be more like, we got the win, finally we're in a position just to secure this victory. We don't have to throw for 400 yards and score 40 points. I question whether there would be a rebalancing toward, we're up, we're good. We'll get super conservative, play it smart. It's difficult to say definitively. Some teams clearly want to keep scoring relentlessly. We saw that with the Detroit Lions, we saw that with the Los Angeles Rams. But we didn't see that with the Philadelphia Eagles, we didn't see that with the Seattle Seahawks. And it's not as though one approach is the only correct one. The Eagles have proven that, the Seahawks have proven that. So you just don't really know. You genuinely don't know. So that represents another potential obstacle Joe Burrow might face. But if Joe Burrow has an outstanding season, and I'm using the word outstanding quite loosely here, Stafford had an outstanding season last year. Dak Prescott had an outstanding season. Josh Allen had an outstanding season. Some for statistical reasons, some for individual performances. Drake May had an outstanding season. Some of that came from beating up on weaker opponents while struggling against stronger ones, but it doesn't really matter. You just recognize it was an entire season of really good, high-quality play. As long as Joe Burrow delivers that level of performance, and I believe the Bengals make the playoffs, but especially if they secure the 1 or 2 seed, the MVP should be his. The only way he doesn't win it is if someone else in the conference is absolutely dominating. And that's where Justin Herbert enters the picture. If he's on fire, crushing it, securing the 1 or 2 seed with superior numbers, more passing yards, more touchdowns. Or in the NFC, if the 1 or 2 seed belongs to a team where Caleb Williams is balling with spectacular plays. I'm trying to think of other quarterbacks who could challenge. I don't think it could be Stafford. Perhaps Jordan Love with the Packers. Or the Detroit Lions bouncing back with a high season. And consider this, Kyler Murray, randomly enough, let's say he starts for the Minnesota Vikings and they win the division as the 2 seed. There would be tremendous momentum for Kyler Murray to be the MVP. Those are the types of narratives that could undercut Joe Burrow's chances. But I do actually find this type of conversation interesting because it's different from a general prediction. I'm planning to make a similar video for Justin Herbert. It'll take a different angle, though there will be plenty of overlap. If I had to choose one right now, it would be Joe Burrow, simply because of everything converging in his favor. However, my biggest concern is, will they need a spectacular season from Joe Burrow? Will those numbers actually materialize? Because I don't think Joe Burrow can casually win the MVP. Even if they're the 1 seed, I don't believe the award goes to him simply because it's his turn or because that narrative exists, not that I personally subscribe to the concept of turns. I don't think Joe Burrow could win the MVP throwing for 3,800 yards and 25 touchdowns. So it's tricky. Definitely tricky. Those are my thoughts on the matter. I would absolutely love to hear your perspectives. What do you all think about Joe Burrow as the MVP for the upcoming season? Let me know your opinions. I genuinely read every single comment. Whether you agree or disagree, let's engage in some discussions, some healthy debates, and ultimately, let's just have some fun. Please do consider subscribing. We're building an amazing community here, and I would genuinely love to have you as part of it. I want to create something that we all feel connected to, we're all excited to be part of. I believe we're well on our way to achieving that. Please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, it genuinely helps with visibility and the algorithm. Thank you so much for watching. See you next time.